Introducing YouTube memberships, a fun way to support the channel while getting some exclusive perks. Click the join button to become a member now and get benefits like badges next to your name on videos, behind-the-scenes photos, advantages during the live trivia game, discounts on merchandise, private one-on-one video chats, the ability to request future video topics, and exclusive 8 to 10 minute videos on the history of the NFL. And now, on with our feature presentation. So, how about the Detroit Lions? I'm not sure how many people saw that one coming. Usually, the kickoff game is a celebration of what the defending Super Bowl champion did the previous year. They get to raise the banner and celebrate with a win. Heck, since 2004, when they started having the defending champion open up the season at home in this game, excluding 2013, since the Baltimore Ravens were on the road due to a scheduling conflict with the Baltimore Orioles, and in 2019, when the Green Bay Packers and Chicago Bears played each other to commemorate the 100th anniversary, even though neither of those teams won the title the previous year, the road team winning is a once-in-a-blue-moon kind of thing. It only happened 3 times before this, and now, a 4th. Granted, the Lions had a lot of help from undercover agent Kadarius Toney, who was doing his best to blow the game with one of the worst performances by any wide receiver I've ever seen. And I don't say that lightly. But by taking this one 21-20, they stunned the Arrowhead crowd and made a statement to the rest of the country. These are not your same old Lions. The hype is warranted. This year is different. The Lions were a sexy pick by many, including myself, to win the NFC North this year. And it's the first time in a while that the Lions might enter a season as the favorite to win the entire division. It's something that hadn't happened since 1993. And one of the most infamous stats in football is that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have won the division more recently than the Lions, even though the Bucs haven't been in that division since realignment back in 2002. And man, did they make a statement last night. They made quite the statement. Which raises the question, is this win a sign of things to come? Was this one individual win a fluke? I mean, it's a long season, and week 1 might not be the best indicator of how a team is going to perform. Heck, last year, the Indianapolis Colts beat the Chiefs, and we saw how their season went. So what's the deal with this win? Well, here's the good news for Lions fans, and I mean really good news. In all likelihood, this game was a sign of things to come. Because every time the Lions opened up a season in a similar way, let's just say that things have turned out really well for them. You can breathe easy, Lions fans. If this win was any indication, this is going to be a fun season. Because if history is any indication, the 2023 Lions team might be historically good. At least by Lions standards. Here's the criteria that I looked at. Simply put, I went back to every single season that the Lions have ever played, whether they were the Lions or the Portsmouth Spartans. No cutoff date or anything like that. We're talking more than 90 years of history dating all the way back to 1930, which was so long ago that there was no NFL championship, and teams existed like the Minneapolis Red Jackets, Staten Island Stapletons, and the Newark Tornadoes. I looked at every single game that the Lions played to open up the season, so whoever their opponent was in week 1, or if it was some bizarre week, because scheduling was somewhat off back in the 30s and 40s. Not that this really mattered. Then, I looked at who the opponent was. Simply put, was this opponent any good? Did this opponent have a winning record the previous year? That's a pretty good barometer of judging whether a team was good or not the year before. So whether or not people had expectations for them entering the new year. If the Lions won that game, and won that game on the road, I made a note of it. So I'm looking at every opponent, much like the Chiefs, that the Lions opened up the season against on the road and won. If you beat a good team on the road during the first week of the season, or at least a team that everyone thinks is going to be good, does that tell us anything about how you're going to do this season? The bad news for the Lions is that this is something that hasn't happened a whole lot. In the 21st century, the Lions winning in Week 1 is a pretty uncommon occurrence. Having said that, the good news is that of the 5 times that it happened before, all 5 times, even if the Lions didn't have high expectations going into the season and weren't expected to do a whole lot, the season turns out to be a great one for them. Turns out, beating a quality opponent on the road in Week 1 means you're probably going to be a pretty good team. So with that in mind, let's break down each of the 5 times it happened before the 2023 season, when the Lions went on the road to defeat the defending Super Bowl champion and 14-3 Kansas City Chiefs. The most recent instance of this prior to 2023 was during this game right here in the 2011 season. To open up the 2011 season after a tumultuous summer thanks to the lockout, the Lions opened up against their former NFC Central rival, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, on the road at Raymond James Stadium. Now, even though the Bucs did not make the playoffs in 2010, they were still an awfully good team, finishing the season with a 10-6 record thanks to some great play by second-year quarterback Josh Freeman and a top 10 defense in football. But to the Lions, none of this mattered, because Detroit went on the road to a hot and muggy Tampa and ended up winning by a final score of 27-20, thanks to a great game by quarterback Matthew Stafford, who finished the game with over 300 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, and a passer rating of 120. Keep in mind that the Lions were not good the previous year. They were just 6-10, so not many people had super high expectations for them going into 2011. But this win against Tampa was a sign of things to come. The Lions made the playoffs for the first time since 1999, and they finished with a 10-6 record thanks to an explosive offense that was 4th in the league in points scored. They improved on their win total by 4, finished with a winning record, and made the playoffs. Not a bad indicator by any means, even if we would find later on that the Bucs in 2011 were a pretty bad team. Prior to that game against the Buccaneers in 2011, to find the last time the Lions won a game on the road to open up the season against a team who had a winning record the previous year, you have to go all the way back to 1983, where coincidentally, they also took on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In 1982, the Bucs finished with a winning record, making the playoffs after going 5-4 in the strike-shortened 9-game season, thanks to a great stretch at the end of the year where they won their final 3 games, with one of those wins coming against the Detroit Lions. In 1983, it was a completely different story, as the Lions won a defensive slugfest by a final score of 11-0 to open up the season. Yes, we would learn later on that the Bucs would not be good in 1983, as they finished the season with an abysmal 2-14 record and a sign of things to come for the team for the rest of the 1980s. But again, we don't have the benefit of foresight with this exercise. The Lions shut out the Bucs thanks to a safety and 3 field goals by the highly underrated Eddie Murray. And anytime your defensive line is so good that they wind up sacking the quarterback 7 times, that's always a good sign they are going to win the game. How did the Lions do in 1983? Despite having a losing record the previous year. So again, not a lot of people had high hopes for them. They ended up finishing the year 9-7 and winning the NFC Central. So yeah, I'd say that win was a pretty good indicator of things to come for Detroit, even if they did beat a Bucs team that we would later learn was not very good, and even if they did lose their next 4 games after that opening day shutout. So we've got the 2011 team and the 1983 team. The team to do it before them? Let's talk about the 1980 Lions. This was a huge mismatch on paper. In one corner, you have the Detroit Lions, a team who went 2-14 the year before, and who was so bad that I did a video on them a while ago, so you can learn more about their ineptitude by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And in the other corner, you have the Los Angeles Rams, the defending NFC champion, and a team that might have been just 1 4th down stop by the Steelers away from winning the Super Bowl. No one had hopes for the Lions on the season, and no one had hopes for the Lions in this game, as they were 9-point underdogs in most sportsbooks. However, the Lions wound up winning this one 41-20, thanks to one of the greatest debuts of all time, as Billy Sims ran wild on the Rams in their first game at Anaheim Stadium, going for 153 rushing yards, over 200 yards from scrimmage, and 3 touchdowns. It truly was an amazing performance. And this win was a very good indication of what was to come for Detroit, as they would finish the season with a 9-7 record, ending the year with a winning record and a 7-win improvement on the previous year, not spending a single day on the season below 500. 3 years, and 3 times, the Lions finished the year with a winning record, even though all 3 times, they had a losing record the year before. But we're not done yet, because now we have to go back a decade prior to the 1970 Lions, when they opened up the season against their bitter rival, the Green Bay Packers. In 1969, the Packers had a great defense that finished 3rd in the league in points allowed, and the defense helped carry them to an 8-6 record. While they didn't make the playoffs that year, as the Vikings just ran wild over the Central back when no wildcards existed, the Packers were a good team, and the Lions had to go on the road to Lambeau Field to open up the season against them. The Packers were the favorites. It should be a good close game, right? Nope. Because the Lions absolutely decimated the Packers and won the game by a final score of 40-0. Green Bay had just 5 first downs all game, as the Lions outgained them 398 to 114 in total yardage, more than tripling their output. Bart Starr is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, and that should go without saying. But on this day, he got nothing going, as the Lions defense completely held him in check, as Starr finished the day going 7 for 17, completing just 41% of his passes for 35 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception, and a passer rating of 24.4, which is worse than if he did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play. A dominant road win against what seemed like a very good team the previous year. And once again, it was a sign of things to come, as the Lions made the playoffs, going 10-4 and improving on their 9-win campaign from the previous year. If you want to learn more about how they made the playoffs, you can do so by clicking the card in the upper right corner. 4 games in the sample size, and all 4 times, it was a good sign of things to come. But we've got one more in the works. Unfortunately, there are no highlights available from this game, seeing as it took place in the early 60s. So I'm just going to continue showing highlights from the bloodbath that took place in 1970. Because why the heck not? However, to open up the 1961 season, much like 1970, the Lions had to take on the Green Bay Packers on the road. In 1960, the Packers were an awfully good team. They were so good, in fact, that they finished the year 8-4 and made it to the NFL Championship before falling at the hands of the Philadelphia Eagles, in what was the only game ever that Vince Lombardi lost as a head coach in the playoffs. That is a tall order going into Milwaukee to face the defending NFL West champions. And Vegas thought so too, as the Packers were favored by 6.5 points. It didn't matter though, as the Lions won it 17-13, forcing Bart Starr to throw 2 interceptions and punching it in twice on the ground thanks to 2 touchdowns by Nick Pietrasante. And even though the Packers would rebound from this and would win the NFL Championship later in the year with an 11-3 record, that win against a good Packers team was a sign of things to come for the Lions in 1961. The Lions finished the season with a winning record, going 8-5-1 and improving on their 7-win season from the previous year. So just to recap, as we circle back to the game you watched last night, prior to the 2023 season, the Lions had 5 instances in their over 90-year franchise history where they opened the season on the road against a team with a winning record the previous year and won the game. In all 5 of them, the Lions finished with a winning record, including 1980, when they were so bad the previous year that they had the number 1 pick in the draft. In all 5 of them, they improved on their winning percentage from the previous year, and sometimes, as was the case in 1983 and in 1980, by a drastic margin. History has told us that if the Lions beat a good team on the road to open up the season, that they will be good, and that it will be a sign of things to come. Now look, I know what you're thinking. Something like this seems way too premature, right? Well, it might be, but may remind you that last year, I did a video about the Los Angeles Rams after they got blown out on opening night against the Buffalo Bills. And I said that history was not on their side, and that if history was anything to go off of, they would not make the playoffs, and they would have a really, really bad season. And sure enough, they followed that up with just about the worst title defense in NFL history. You can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. All I'm saying is that for the 2023 Lions, history is on their side in a very good way, and history has a funny way of repeating itself from time to time. The Lions had super high expectations going into the 2023 season for the first time in forever, and they answered the call and then some by knocking off the Chiefs to kick off the new year. Yes, it's one game, and yes, it is a super long season, but if you're a Lions fan, you've got to be feeling pretty good about this one. Because if history is anything to go off of, there might be some Motown magic in the air. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.